Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this panel discussion on improving access to justice for workers with a focus on the case study of the United Arab Emirates. So I'm your moderator, Idriss Jazairy. This is a topical subject because this subject we're discussing today is part of the whole discussion concerning migration. And I think that if we can promote an exchange between European industrialized Western countries and the Gulf, it would be to the benefit of both because Europe is having problems to deal with migration and having qualms and tremors about its consequences when they're just receiving 0.02% of their population in terms of migrants. And here is a region that demonstrated that receiving the highest percentage of migrants from abroad, that they have built on that prosperity. So migration can be coterminous with GNP growth. It's not necessarily a problem. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. Access to justice is a central part of the good functioning of a foreign labor of such importance in percentage-wise as is the case in the UAE. I'm grateful to the UAE to have accepted to be the first country to discuss with the center of this subject, which is a delicate subject. They have accepted, and we're looking forward to establishing a similar dialogue with other Gulf countries so that at the end of the day we can have a synthesis of all these diverse experiences, bring out the best practice, and probably assist the region itself in further moving forward to become perhaps a leader in terms of the best use of this key resources, human resources, in the advancement of happiness. Since today is the day when we celebrate happiness, this is a way that it can be achieved, especially at a time when oil prices are collapsing and we see that the only real resources is the human resource. Access to justice in the UAE is more than just improving an individual's access to courts or guaranteeing legal representation. It's the ability of people to seek and obtain a remedy for grievances through formal or informal channels, which can introduce a solution which would comply with modern human rights standards. The ultimate goal is to offer the population a more attractive alternative to that of conflict in resolving disputes and thereby contributing to sustainable peace. In the absence of access to justice, people are unable to have their voices heard, to exercise their rights, or to challenge discrimination. Within countries of destination, migrant workers may be denied their fundamental rights to work, including freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. The capacity to seek remedy may be a challenge in the context of the kafala system, which is widespread in the GCC countries as well as in Jordan and Lebanon, but which very much differs from one country to another. The sponsorship system has been questioned by international community for possible incompatibility with international labor standards. in particular relating to employment laws, to the right to freedom of movement as well as to the right to equal access to justice. The right of freedom of movement has been introduced in the UAE and in some other countries in the region, but it's not a general right, and therefore I think this is a case where the UAE example should be a good source for replication on a broader basis. For this reason, reforms of the kafala system have been considered by GCC countries, including the UAE authorities that has played a leadership role in this field, and therefore we welcome the opportunity of having some independent, and I want to emphasize independent experts that have come from the UAE to tell us about how they see the evolution of the kafala system as a way to institutionalize and improve relations and predictability of relations between employers and employees. GCC countries have made efforts to improve the rights of migrant workers and in particular their capacity to access both formal and informal institutions. The UAE has recently adopted a series of reforms referred to by His Excellency in this direction, such as inter alia, the creation of a legal aid department for destitute persons, including migrant workers, and the establishment of a one-day court system, as well as of mobile courts in buses that actually go to the workers when the workers can't go to the courts. It's the story of the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad. Muhammad will go to the mountain. It has also endorsed legislation on domestic workers. We'd like to hear more about from the experts that are here today. The rationale behind today's gathering is to address opportunities and challenges ahead for improving equal access to justice for workers in the UAE and beyond. The debate will focus on areas where progress has been made and will assess their human rights impact. It will then focus on areas where future progress is needed and feasible. And we're grateful to have with us also on the panel a representative of Human Rights Watch that has been looking at the issue under discussion very closely in the past few years. This will help to move forward a consensus around the adoption of policies and measures aiming at enhancing the legal empowerment of foreign labor and the clarification of their framework of employment. During today's discussion, I would really ask all participants to limit on the panel their contribution to 5 minutes. After all presentations have been delivered, there'll be, as was said earlier, an interactive dialogue with all of you in the audience. And I hope this dialogue will be frank, challenging, and constructive. Please, as you intervene later, don't make statements, ask questions, challenge issues, but make them short so that we can have an inspiring discussion. I'm confident that the outcome of this panel discussion will serve as an opportunity for both source and host countries to engage on further far-reaching discussions on this important issue in the future, because I think the happy ending of this story is that experience has proved that both the source country and the destination country can stand to gain from a good organization of labor flows. It's a win-win situation. And perhaps the industrialized countries may at some times wish to consider that perhaps some leaves can be taken out of the Gulf book on this issue. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the Ambassador of India, who is with us today, who is one of my colleagues in the past. And his presence, I think, has strong symbolic value because this is an issue we're talking about, which is of concern to source countries as well as destination countries. And many of the misunderstandings or the problems that arise in the destination countries could also be better addressed through looking at the preparation of the migrant labor going to the Gulf from the source country initially. This is not a criticism, but it is a necessity to emphasize that if we want to get over these human difficulties, and there's so many sad stories you hear, you could just, the only way to console yourself from what you've just heard is, well, yeah, things happen somewhere in some place, anecdotal or symbolic of a prevailing reality. That is the question. But Excellency, perhaps you could give us an idea of how you perceive this possibility of better cooperation between source country and destination country to try to make this wonderful migration experience an example to be followed in other parts of the world. Yeah. On the question of domestic law, probably one recommendation coming from this discussion that we have, and we're really grateful for your own comments as well, is that ultimately this law was introduced in 2017 to catch up, as it were, on domestic law, some of the progress that had been achieved for other general workers. But ultimately, you would expect the two laws to join together into one. And this is where the ultimate result of the process should be. So this could be one of our recommendations. Because what we want to do is not only to review what's ongoing, but how it can be further improved. And I think this is something that we could put forward. I think it was interesting to hear also from some of the preceding speakers, in particular, I think, was Dr. Wells, about this extraordinary system that's been set up in the UAE on guaranteeing that workers get paid. It's like a system we have in Algeria for the payment of alimony, where the state will pay women that are divorced for the alimony due by the former husband, and then the state goes after the husband to get the money back. But in this exercise, the money gets to the ultimate victim. And this is the same kind of it's a different mechanism, but it's an interesting endeavor. I think we should look into it into greater detail to set it as one of the examples of positive practices that could be replicated. It's something absolutely extraordinary what's happening. I don't think that in the history of humankind there has been such an extraordinary transformation of a material, psychological situation as the one that we now witness in the UAE. I remember arriving to the UAE as a young diplomat, and in Dubai, and there was the Sheikh's fort and a few hotels around, and there was nothing else. And over just so many years, a few decades, a total transformation, and these parts of the world have become the center of the world in many regards. So it's at the same time a fascinating human experience to see how has the individual preserved, as you were saying, their identity, their faith, their mode of living, and at the same time seeing the environment completely changed from what their fathers or grandfathers could even imagine. So I think it's a laboratory also in international harmony because of all the countries that are present there. And I think it would be a pity to lose this opportunity to try and draw some lessons from that that would be applicable and beneficial to the rest of the world. So to all of you that have participated in this meeting, I extend my warmest thanks, and in particular to the members of the panel, every single one of them, for what they have said, for their understanding, their creativeness. We were very fortunate to start the process with such a positive first step.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.